Although the hollow Earth theory has been dismissed by most mainstream scientists, the 18th century British astronomer Edward Halley of Halley's Comet fame believed the Earth is hollow and might support life. In some mystical traditions, it's believed that ascended masters of esoteric wisdom inhabited subterranean caverns inside the hollow Earth. We'll also meet an historian who also believes the Earth is hollow and that it may in fact be inhabited by an advanced race of beings.
Many scientists, including the Japanese, believe that it's probably one of the most ancient myths on the planet, that Earths form as hollow spheres, not as solid balls. One thing I do know as a scientist, if there is a void there, there will be life.
Brooks, who first theorized that the Earth is hollow?
That's a good question. I think anciently, Plato and some of the early Greek writers mentioned legends of a hollow Earth. In some of the ancient Egyptian writings, some of the race escaped into the Earth. Of course, there are legends from the Maya who were constantly searching for openings into the inner Earth. They believed that life force came out of the Earth. I think scientifically and quasi-modern times, it would have to be Edmund Halley. He was the first one that really created hollow Earth theory. The interesting thing I found is that nobody's ever been. Nobody's actually sailed to the Arctic looking for that opening. Those waters have been covered with ice since the Earth cooled, and in 2007 they opened for the first time.
I've come up with substantial evidence from Scripture, from history, from science, that our Earth is indeed hollow. We know from the Scriptures that hell, the location of hell where the devil and his angels live, is down. But we also find out where heaven is. In Ephesians chapter 4, it says, before Christ ascended into heaven after his resurrection, he first ascended into the lower parts of the earth. The location of paradise, where Christ went to heaven at death, was in the heart of the earth.
Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. And if you're going to claim that there are animals and plants and things living inside of our planet, there's definitely a need for some extraordinary evidence there.
Sir Edmund Halley was a pretty famous astronomer, member of the, I believe, the Royal Academy of Scientists in Britain. How could he have been so wrong?
Edmund Halley was a fantastically intelligent guy, and using the technology that he had, he discovered a comet. And the fact that he was able to do that and give us the information that he was able to give us is extraordinary. But that doesn't mean that everything that he says was right.
Give me the best geological evidence that the Earth is, as you believe, hollow.
Well, I think the best geological evidence is going to be seismological. The USGS tied all their listening posts on the Earth together as one system. Now, when there's a heavy earthquake on one side of the planet, they're picked up with other listening stations around the planet, and we kind of take a CAT scan of the Earth. Washington University studied 600,000 of these under the direction of Dr. Y. Sessions, and they discovered the damping waves from another ocean underneath the Atlantic Ocean, underneath the crust.
It's really interesting to think, well, what if the Earth were hollow? But what we can do as scientists is say, if the Earth was hollow, what kind of evidence would we expect to see?
We've got these CAT scans of the Earth that reveal a void inside the planet.
A lot of the stuff that is quoted as evidence out there either isn't scientific or is simply incorrect.
But for both types of waves, seismic waves, there is a place on the opposite side of the Earth from the epicenter where there is a shadow zone.
We do know that the Earth contains iron and nickel in very high densities. And we know this by looking at those seismic radio waves and how they're deflected.
Well, scientists claim it's because S waves cannot go through molten lava, but the P waves should be able to go through it. This barrier inside the Earth is actually the hollow, which the seismic waves cannot go through.
Inside the planet, we probably don't have a fusion source of light like we have here. It's probably a very hot iron core, like a one solid iron crystal. And if that's so, and it's anywhere around 5,000 degrees, it's probably glowing white hot. And if it's glowing white hot, it's a source of light.
The inner sun they estimate to be about 600 miles in diameter. It generates electromagnetic energy, and it comes out in the form of light and heat that gives life and life to us and the people inside the Earth.
The gravitational pull of something that was massive enough to, and I'm not talking massive as far as size, but massive even as far as density, that it would have such a huge gravitational pull that things existing within that core would simply be sucked into it.
Now, I did a calculation on the inner sun, and it only consists of about 0.099% of the weight of the Earth. So the inner sun having such a small mass, it doesn't exert hardly any gravitational interaction.
Once you get up to the North Pole, what do you expect to find?
We do know the Ross gull, which is a very small, dainty little seagull that my great-great-grandfather named. It flies north in the wintertime. It's not built for 80 below weather, so it finds someplace warm north to spend the winter. I spoke to the leading ornithologist in Sweden on this bird. They have no clue where this bird goes.
Well, that might be an anomaly, but that doesn't necessarily lead you to believe that the Earth is hollow. And of course, as scientists, we have to look at Occam's razor, because the most simple explanation is most likely the right one.
Every few years, there is a zoological, an oceanographic expedition, and they sample sea rays because these have a tendency to show up new species every now and then. Normally, they'll see 5, 10, maybe 20 new species. After the 2007 ice shelf broke off, they did their routine sampling, 1,500 new species of rays. There is no way that these kinds of rays could evolve in that short amount of time. They had to come from another sea somewhere.
According to the legends, what do you expect to find inside the interior of the Earth?
There will be life. It might be microbial, it might be more complex, like a fish or a bird, and then again, it may be civilized.
The story of the lost Vikings that colonized Greenland for about 1,000 years and just disappeared. Admiral Byrd in 1909, he knew Eskimo language, and he asked them, where did these lost Viking colonists go? They said that, well, the hunting party came from the north one winter and said that they had found a paradise. And so they all just packed up their bags, the Eskimo said, and just traipsed off across the ice towards the north and never came back.
Tell me about Admiral Byrd's flight over the Antarctic.
Admiral Byrd is an aviation hero, no question about it.
Is there any unexplored land left on this Earth that might appeal to adventurous young Americans?
Yes, there is. And not up around the North Pole, because it's getting crowded up there now, because they find out it's really usable, not only to live in, but militarily. But strangely enough, there's left in the world today an area as big as the United States that's never been seen by a human being. And that's beyond the pole on the other side of the South Pole from Middle America. And I think it's quite astonishing.
Evidently, he did discover something, but officially he could not report on that. The rumors that came out, and rumors of rumors, and rumors of diaries, lush green forests with liquid water and woolly mammoths, and where certainly none should have been. What's the truth? It's difficult to tell. That's one of the reasons why we want to do this expedition. Let's prove or disprove the biggest myth in human history.
There's an account that he flew past the ice, came to a continent covered with less vegetation, even saw a mammoth wandering on the terrain below. Well, he was presently sighted by flying saucer type craft that took control of his airplane and landed him near an inner Earth city. He was taken before the government officials of the inner world, and they gave him a message to take back to Washington. And they did not approve of our use of nuclear weapons. We had just blown up a couple of cities at the end of World War II, so they put him back in the air. He took the message to Washington, but they told him they didn't want him telling his story to anybody, but he couldn't keep his mouth shut. We've found several people that have claimed that they talked to him and he told them what happened.
Are there eyewitness accounts, or is there anecdotal evidence to suggest that UFOs are coming out of these openings?
Yes, lots of eyewitness reports, even official ones, military ones. We've interviewed radio operators for the Navy that received official messages from ships at sea that talked about large silver ships coming up out of the water. In fact, they're so common they're called USOs, undersea objects, instead of unidentified flying objects. So they're actually more plentiful than ones that fly in the air.
Yeah, I believe that the lost tribes of Israel actually did migrate to the Hollow Earth. They have been living there for 2,500 years, so they have become much more advanced and scientifically than us. I believe that they have what we've seen flying around the Earth, the flying saucer type craft that people have seen all over the Earth.
When we look at satellite images of the Earth, and more specifically of the Arctic or the North Pole region, what do we see? Why can't we see that opening if it's there?
Well, that's one of the most puzzling questions that I still don't have an answer to. For one thing, in 2006, there was a new rule passed called the Data Denial Act. This prohibited real-time imagery of the Earth above the 60th parallel. So you cannot find any publicly available satellite images of the North Pole. They're just not available. You can't find them anywhere. They're all classified. The ones that we were able to get our hands on, because of the way satellites stitch the photographs together, they're stitched at the poles. So what you see is a nice round dark spot at the North Pole where all these pictures are stitched together, but that part's left out. The other images, that even oblique angles that we were able to get, are all covered in clouds. So there are just no images of this region of the Earth from the air.
Is that by design, do you think? Is somebody somewhere trying to hide the fact that there is an opening to the Earth?
Well, I really don't know the answer to that. I just know that it's not available. So it raises all kinds of questions, like, is somebody trying to keep it secret? Well, if they are, they're doing a really good job.
And what are you trying to do? How are you going to get there? Who's coming with you?
That's a very good question. There are only 2 civilian ships on Earth that can make this expedition. Both of them are nuclear powered. They belong to the Russians. They used to belong to the Soviets. They're 23,000 tons, about 450 feet long. There's a helicopter on them. So they're well outfitted, so we can get some very serious, credible measurements and samples during this 15-day expedition.
Yeah, the Russian nuclear icebreaker is called a Yamal. It means end of Earth. And there is a peninsula up there in the Russian Arctic. It's called Yamal too.
It's not actually the North Pole. The North Pole's been sailed every year for 30 years. It's off from the North Pole several hundred miles. This is in a region that's never been sailed before. It's between the magnetic North Pole and the actual North Pole. The waters are reported to be the roughest on the planet, so we're talking 10-story seas. This is not going to be a pleasure cruise by any stretch of the imagination. We'll be breaking ice for 8 days to get there. So it's not an easy place to get to.
Are you personally planning on going into the interior of the Earth?
That's a really good question. I'm going to be on the helicopter that flies over the opening, and we'll play it by ear. I do plan to return and live to tell about it.
I applaud that he's willing to actually go out and look for evidence to support his claim. And that's what a good scientist is all about. And if he wants to go up there and see if there's a hole there, more power to him. That's what it's going to take to convince people like me and other scientists that there is a hole in the Earth and that the Earth is hollow.
What do you need in order to push this over the top and to make this expedition happen?
We need to finance the deposit on the ship, which is roughly half the money, about $1 million. Once that's done, we'll make a global announcement that the expedition is officially on, and at that point, Richard, there's more people know about the Hollow Earth than knew about Middle Earth before the movies came out. We have tens of millions of enthusiasts all around the world that are ready to come to the support of this expedition once it becomes a reality.
So do you expect to find some sort of a large opening big enough that you could actually sail a nuclear vessel through?
We don't really know how big this opening is. It could be as much as 100 miles across. It could be as small as 20 miles across. In any case, when you're at sea, you only get about 8 or 9 miles of view. Then the curvature of the Earth takes over. So this could have been sailed by lots of times and never seen. I did speak to some retired Navy admirals, and they told me there is an anomaly at sea. They call it the oceanic depression. It's a place where two ships can be sailing side by side and one will just sail out of view for sometimes a day at a time and then come back up. These are places where sea level is not sea level. It's kind of concave. Now their theory is that these are spots on the Earth that the gravitational field is more intense, so it pulls the water down. And I proposed a different theory, which got them thinking. What if these are areas on the Earth where the gravity is actually lower than it is everywhere else, and the outside gravity pulls the water away? That would fit hollow Earth theory, that the gravity is centered in the crust, not in the core so much. And that would mean that the water could get pulled away from an opening and you could actually sail right into it and never know. Because if it was 100 miles across, you'd never see the curvature.
I had been programmed, and this data did not work within the confines of that program. I had to see it for myself. 2 weeks later, I did. The team traveled by ship. The journey was incredibly long. The days kept getting colder. Eventually, we reached the wall. The first thing that struck me was that it was so irregular in height and shape. The illustrations and videos that Tom showed us seemed to illustrate a uniformity about it, but seeing it in person revealed that this wasn't the case. Some sections of the wall were sloped, while others were not. I would describe some areas to be 2 to 3 times the height of the Washington Monument, while others appeared to be much taller than that. On this particular visit, I did not leave the ship and therefore did not see things from atop the wall, but I can confirm that the wall is gigantic and appears almost infinite. This just scratches the surface of my experience and observations. While 99% of my work was performed from behind a desk, I saw things and learned things that would blow your socks off. The first question is whether the Earth is flat. It is. The second question is whether the world as we know it is surrounded by an ice wall. It is. The third question is what is beyond the ice wall? We have a tiny sliver of the answer to that question, and the little bit that we know is astounding. I've kept this to myself long enough. I'm tired of the lies. Mostly I'm tired of seeing the wrong people prosper because of those lies. I need help. I want to get this story out, and I need to do so safely. I'm not keen on being locked away for violating my security clearance. I expect to be vulnerable to harassment or harm by private individuals, foreign governments, and probably my own government as well. I'm writing this from a laptop that I purchased with cash 2 years ago and haven't used until earlier this week. I am in a parking lot outside a motel using their free Wi-Fi. I've gone over this message in my mind for years. I've thought about posting to YouTube or sending out to media outlets, but I can't get myself into a situation where I've given up my freedom so that a total of 100 people can hear my story and disregard it. I am not a paranoid person, and I do not live my life in fear, but I don't believe in taking unnecessary risks. I knew that I might someday need or want sound evidence to back up my story. Photos can be fake, documents can be forged, witnesses can perjure. I'm not about to let myself be dismissed as a lunatic or a liar. So let me ask you, what would you do? I did something, and it doesn't involve photos. I have verifiable proof of my journey and where it led, but a premature disclosure or a release could undermine my ability to authenticate it. I hope to soon be in a position where I can disclose it.
Now, if you've been listening to my lectures, you know I've been telling y'all, listen, what's going on is we are going through a planetary shift. The poles are reversing, okay? These beings came and invaded our planet, took over our planet, okay? And they only been here a couple hundred years. I've been telling you guys that, and it's crazy how the ancestors working, right? Because it's like every time I tell you guys something, y'all will DM me, tag me in something. You know, there's like, hey, you told me this, and it popped up. So the more you keeping up with these lectures, you will begin to see that everything that I'm telling you is coming to me directly from the source, from the ancestors. All right, I go to Google just to try to back up what I'm telling you guys with some form of human-made construct. All right, but a lot of the information that I have, some things can't even be put into human words. You just have to feel it. Okay, so these human beings are running scared right now, y'all. They terrified. Okay? They're doing everything to hide the fact that this second sun is coming back into our atmosphere.